Hey everyone, I'm Brian. Today, I'm going to show you how I made the fence pieces of my Mournstead project that's inspired by The Witcher 3: Wild Hunt. This is part 4 of a multi-part series where I'm painting a 3D printed model of the Mournstead Tavern that was designed by the group World of Pratheron. My project is not sponsored by this group or anyone who is involved with the creation of the 3D models. I'm just printing and painting the set for fun. If you haven't seen parts 1, 2, and 3, you can check out the link to my playlist in the description. Before I continue, I want to let you know that this part of my project was supposed to be where I worked on the first floor of the tavern, but I had to go out of town this past weekend at the last minute and I didn't have time to finish the pieces. Instead, I worked on the fence pieces that I had printed a couple of weeks ago. I brought them with me on my trip, and with my toolbox full of painting supplies, I painted the pieces in my hotel room. However, the trip was very stressful and so many things went wrong, so I didn't put this video together in time for my usual upload schedule. I will be intermingling the crafting with the story of my trip, so if you don't want to hear me talk about this stuff and only want to focus on the crafting, I've included timestamps so you can skip ahead. The Mournstead village set included fence pieces, so I tried to print one batch of each configuration. There were 3 in total, and the simple picket fence configuration printed okay. I ran into some trouble printing the horizontal beam type fences because of the overhangs. All the Mournstead pieces were marked as being able to print without the need for support, but I was skeptical because these pieces clearly needed them under the gaps. But I tried printing them as is, and some of them turned out okay, but most had significant issues as you can see with the missing parts and the spaghetti stringing. I tried printing them again with support, but that would more than double the printing time, so I decided to wait and see what the other fence pieces looked like. The cross barricade type pieces were somewhat mixed because some turned out okay, but others were a tangled mess of filament. I didn't use supports the first time, but when I tried to add them for a second attempt, my slicer program wouldn't let me because it said there were errors in the print layers. I couldn't figure out how to correct the layer errors, so I decided not to use these fence pieces for my project. My weekend trip was a last-minute event, and I got to my hotel late in the evening. Then I was rushed through the check-in process because the employee at the front desk was apparently in a bad mood. I was offered a room on the ground floor near the lobby, and I was thankful for not having to go up the stairs or use the elevator. But my proximity to the lobby meant that there was a lot of noise from employees and other guests passing through the area. This would be a recurring issue all night. The last printed fence piece was the gate to the tavern entranceway. Most of it printed fine, but the long diagonal pieces had issues as well, and they were printed misshapen. One of the pieces came loose from the build plate, so it wasn't even attached to the gate. My plan was to make the best with what I had, so I started painting the intact fence pieces first. I added a coat of dark brown acrylic paint and set them aside to dry while I figured out how to salvage the other pieces. After dropping off my luggage in my room, I walked across the street to a nearby restaurant. I was very hungry and had not eaten anything since breakfast. After I was seated, I asked for some water and then I didn't see the waiter again. I was sitting there waiting to order, but he didn't come back, and over the next 20 minutes, I saw multiple groups of people come in, were attended to right away, and the other waiters and waitresses busy moving about. I got up and went to the entrance to complain to the host and said I'm leaving because my waiter forgot I was here. He just shrugged and said, "Okay," and then I left. I used some wire cutters to clip off the broken and stringy sections from the horizontal fence pieces. Since most of the pieces were intact, I put hot glue on the bottom of the fence legs to act as stabilizers. I had brought a silicone mat with me to cover the table in the hotel room so the hot glue didn't stick to it. It's not the same blue mat I use at home, as this one is smaller, although you can't see the whole thing on camera. After I put the hot glue on all the fence pieces, I painted them with brown paint. The entire process from gluing to painting took nearly an hour, and it was very late in the evening, so I was tired. After I left the restaurant, I went back to the hotel and was planning on driving down the street to a Taco Bell to get dinner there, since they were the only place open nearby. I reached for my car keys, but to my shock, they weren't in my pocket. I thought I left them in my room, but they weren't there. I was panicking because I know I locked my car after I arrived at the hotel, and I didn't take anything out of the pocket my keys were in. But after that, I didn't recall seeing my keys again. I went to the front desk and asked if anyone had found a set of keys, but the same employee who checked me in gave me an irritated look and said no, and went back to pigging out on potato chips and watching videos on her phone. I scoured my room again, and when I was certain my keys weren't in there, I retraced my steps all the way back to the restaurant. I didn't see my keys, and I didn't know what to do. I was too far away from home to get a ride back and get my spare key, so it seemed like my only option was to call a locksmith and see if they could make me a new key. As I was pondering this option and swearing about my bad luck, I happened to look down and saw something glinting in the rocks of a nearby planter. I walked over and saw my car keys lying there. I have no idea how they got there, but I scooped them up and drove to that Taco Bell to get dinner. I was fortunate that I found my keys and not some random person who probably could have stolen my car, and then they also had my house keys on there too, so that would have been a huge problem. While I was working on clipping off some bits from the gate piece, I accidentally snapped off one of the legs. It was barely hanging on, so I grabbed some super glue from my kit and reattached it. I don't know what happened, but the glue was pouring out of the bottle, so I had to wipe it up quickly and then dab some on the gate. The glue needed time to dry, so I set it aside and cleaned up the rest of the mess on the table, or on the mat. After my mediocre dinner from Taco Bell, I started filming the fence project. The lighting was really bad in the hotel room, and I only had a little lamp on the table. The other light fixtures around the room weren't bright enough to reach the table. I worked for a couple of hours, and around midnight I went to bed because I was practically falling asleep at the table. Unbeknownst to me, I would only get a few hours of sleep. I woke up to the sound of a fire alarm. I didn't know what was happening, so I got dressed and went out into the hall. Other guests were emerging from their rooms, and I rushed to the front desk because my room was closest to the lobby. An employee was on the phone with the fire department, and they were trying to turn off the alarm. I asked if we were evacuating, but the employee said there was nothing to worry about. There was no fire, and the alarm was triggered because a guest was smoking in their room, or that was the assumption at the moment. More guests were filling the lobby, and the employee at the desk was assuring everyone that there was no emergency. A few minutes later, the fire department arrived, and they went with the other members of the hotel staff upstairs. People were chattering about what was going on, but I was really pissed off over being woken up, so I grabbed some coffee from the pot in the breakfast area and went back to my room. Other guests were also shuffling back to their rooms, and sometime later I overheard people talking in the lobby, and the alarm was in fact triggered by someone smoking in their room. To be more specific, this person was vaping and they didn't think it was a problem. After painting the gate dark brown, I used a light tan paint to cover the parts that looked like rope. I considered wrapping some of my own twine around these areas to make it look like real rope, but I was tired and irritated and I just wanted to finish this project. Painting the ropes on the gate took a very long time, and I realized I was going to have to do the same for every single fence piece. But before I attempted that, I dry brushed a little bit of tan paint on each fence piece. It's hard to see on camera due to the position of the light. I spent the next hour carefully painting the rope pieces one by one. When I was finished, the last thing I needed to do was dry brush some tan paint on the picket fence pieces. While I was painting, I kept hearing this loud humming sound coming from somewhere nearby. I didn't know what was causing it, and I tried to ignore it, but the sound was very loud and very repetitious. At one point, I went out into the hall by the elevators to see if it was causing the sound, but it was not. It made its own loud sound when in use. As soon as it was daylight, I packed up my supplies and loaded everything into my car, making sure that I had my keys firmly in my hand. I went to the front desk to check out, and the employee there at the time took my key card and then did nothing. I stood there until she asked if I wanted something, and then I said I wanted a printout of my receipt. She begrudgingly printed it out and handed it to me. I was going to complain about the rude customer service and the inconvenience of all the noise and the 5 a.m. fire alarm, but I was in no mood to start a fight, so I left. The drive back home was really long, and when I got home, I crashed on my bed and slept all day. That's all I have for now. Thanks for watching my video and putting up with my long story about my awful weekend. Stay tuned for part 5 of my Mournstead project, where I hopefully get started on painting the first floor of the tavern.